How many times has this happened to you if you're shopping for groceries, right? You get to the grocery store, you're in a rush. As happens to me all the time. My wife tells me I gotta be somewhere. You get to the line and you see that there are multiple lines, one shorter than the other. You know you gotta get through them. And you're gonna choose, which line do I go in? So you think it through. I often look and first thing is, which line is longer? Next is, how many items are in that person's grocery cart? Sometimes I'll even look at the cashier and wonder what they did last night to see how fast they're going to move. Now, invariably, I always choose the wrong line anyways. Take a look at this, and in your heads, I'd love to hear which line is longer. It turns out, in fact, that both lines are the same length. This is called the Mueller experiment, and over 90% of people who take a look at this get it wrong. Why? Well, can we trust our intuition? That's the central question that we're going to walk through today with a very specific lens around climate change and investing to solve the climate challenge. We're going to spend the next 15, 20 minutes or so reprogramming our intuition. But we need to understand what our intuition is made up in order to do that. And the first is the cognitive. Those are your past experiences, things that may have happened to you, that day you stepped off the curb a little too early, or perhaps a little too late, and you learned that lesson, and you're not going to do that again. The next is the emotional. It's fear, passion, love, excitement, the things that drive us as well, and can be those critical factors that help perhaps even push us in the wrong direction into a decision-making trap. The last, knowledge, intellect, data, information. It's that wisdom, if you will, that you have collected over the years. And again, you use that to make decisions. Well, I am no psychologist and certainly no therapist, so I can't do anything about items 1 and 2, but we can talk about data. So let's get into it. And I'm going to share with you one more item. Why do we need to reprogram our intuition? Because if we're going to solve the climate challenge, we have to make different types of decisions, specifically when it comes to how we invest. And that's what I do. I'm a climate investor. So, what is climate? What is climate technology? Climate technology is typically defined as a solution that helps reduce greenhouse gas emissions or reduce the impacts of climate change. Still, others would add that there is more to it. It should also be the technologies that measure the emissions of anything that we do, monitor and report. As a climate investor, I ask myself a few questions. 3 simple questions. Within the first 10 years of my investment, or the first 10 years of your investment, how much carbon is this investment going to remove from the economy? How fast is it going to remove that carbon? And at what price? Now, as a recovering engineer, everything comes with an acronym. So the first one I call the carbon reduction potential. Again, the total amount of carbon that can be removed from the environment, or removed from the atmosphere, or removed from the economy by the application of this solution. The next, for those of you who are studying business or finance, you'll be very familiar with CAGR. Well, we've changed that to CATR, the compound annual decarbonization rate, the rate at which the decarbonization can happen. And the third, the carbon investment efficiency. That is that price, that dollar figure that you can actually attach and say, this is how much it costs to pull that out of the economy. So we've got these 3 questions that we can ask, but against what do you compare it? We need thresholds. So we've determined thresholds. And we're going to walk through how. The first for our carbon reduction potential is 2 tons of carbon dioxide equivalents for every dollar we invest. So if I invest $1 million in something, I expect within 10 years, we'll pull out 2 million tons of carbon from the economy. $10 million, 20 million tons from the economy. The next threshold, our cater, it's noted as greater than 100% of 1.5 degrees. And the reason that that is stated that way is the enhanced Paris-aligned targets that was agreed to by 196 countries around the world to try to stabilize the climate to no more than 1.5 degrees centigrade greater than the pre-industrial average. The last, our carbon investment efficiency, is $5 for every ton of carbon that we're able to remove from the economy. How'd we get them, though? There's a lot of really interesting facts, and we're going to share each one of them. The first is this monstrous number of 1.1784 trillion tons of carbon. This is the total amount of anthropogenic carbon, or human-emitted carbon, from the burning of fossil fuels, from the felling of trees and forests, that has happened since the dawn of industrialization, and what is projected to go out through to about 2050 if we are to hit a 1.5 degree future. The next, another monstrous number, $125 trillion. This is the estimated cost, according to the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, for decarbonizing the economy. Others, like McKinsey, have put this number at about $250 to $275 trillion. Regardless, it's huge. Our next, 33%. According to the International Monetary Fund, 33% of all investment is actually lost, wasted. Now, most people think, of course it is, there's grift, there's theft, but that's actually not where most of that goes. Over a long period of time, when you're deploying this much capital, you have a change in policy, a change in government, a change in contractor, a change in legals, all sorts of things, and it results in duplication, sometimes triplication of effort, and so you lose a lot of that money. Next is 30%. Now, according to the United States Department of Energy, about 30% of the cost needs to come from investment. That is direct equity from private investors and the public market. That is the amount that is required to unlock all the debt. About 70% of everything that we need to pay for comes from debt. Think of treasury bills and bonds and so on. The next is a factor of safety of 10. What is a factor of safety? Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I get in an elevator, I don't know why, but I've always looked at that little placard that says, maximum capacity, 1,000 kilograms, 2,000 pounds, whatever it is, right? But actually, what I learned many years ago is that maximum capacity, they have a factor of safety built into it, just like the chair you're sitting on right now. Most elevators actually can carry 3 to 5 times that posted load. And the reason is, if an elevator were to fail, injury and even death, well, that caution gets built into every engineer's assumptions. Same thing with the chair you're sitting on. Now, it might have a maximum load of 200 pounds, but in fact, it's rated for 400 pounds if you were to look at the engineering specifications. And because climate change is so critical and really represents the end of our way of life, it has earned the dubious honor of a maximum factor, which is 10. And the last 10%. This is the typical equity concentration limit, the amount of the company that I would like to own when I invest in a climate technology. So when you take these numbers together, we really start to work them. And I've brought along something with me today. This is my black box. This is my function machine, if you will. And let's just turn it on. It's packed with all of those algorithms you would imagine that an engineer like me would put together. And I'm going to slide into it for each of us, all of our numbers that we've just walked through. And what do we get from it? We get our CRP threshold of 2 tons of carbon for every dollar in which we invest. Now, this trend line, this graph that you're looking at, shows you the rate of change over time. This is the rate at which we need to decarbonize the economy. When we plot anything that is above this line, when we plot the technology and its cater, We can see that if it's above that threshold, then in fact it qualifies. Why? Because it's actually decarbonizing the economy faster than our intention, which is great. But if a technology once plotted, once understood, falls below this line, then it's actually slowing down the rate of decarbonization that we're after. So it can't be qualified as a climate technology investment, at least not one that I'm interested in. That is our Cater threshold. Now, brought our factoring machine back here so we can look at our last one. Now this, again, once we plug in all of our numbers, we're really trying to understand what our carbon investment efficiency is, that $5 for every ton that's pulled out of the economy. And this is a very different number than what some people think of. They think, oh, the cost of carbon, like buying a carbon offset or a carbon removal. It's not. This is the cost that the company is able to achieve through its removal, not the cost of selling carbon to somebody. So, we've got our thresholds. Great. Now what? Well, we're going to use it as an opportunity to rate, rank, and score various investments. But something happens as a climate investor. I'm overwhelmed with the number of really interesting opportunities that are presented. And there's almost always some really fantastical headline number that people present. And here's a great example of one. This is a technology that was presented that is called a precision application and pesticide control technology. They told us that they had managed to reduce the total application of pesticides by over 93%. That's a huge number. And when you think about the health risks associated with pesticide, the water risk, the pollution, you want to reduce that. This seems like a really great idea. But is it a climate technology? Well, through our excitement, of course, we plotted the data, and what did we find? Well, you'll see here that the carbon dioxide removal, the CRP, the carbon reduction potential, actually failed. The reason is because pesticide production and transportation is actually a much less carbon-intensive process and procedure than we were aware of. It was a great opportunity for us to certainly learn. It also failed on its rate of decarbonization. But boy, it's really efficient from a cost perspective. But nonetheless, it didn't qualify. Now, I'm not saying people shouldn't invest in this. As a matter of fact, it's a wonderful and a very successful company. But it just didn't qualify as a climate investment. Let's take a look at another. This is another big headline number, 1 million years. Now, what this is here is, this is a direct air capture solution. So this is pulling atmospheric carbon dioxide straight out of the air, concentrating it, and storing it underground for 1 million years. And I get this question all the time, hey, have you guys made your first direct air capture or your first CDR investment? The answer is no. And the reason is this. The amount of carbon that's actually able to pull out of the air, the speed at which it's able to do it, and the cost, none of which qualifies. It's very large, very energy intensive, and it costs a tremendous amount to pull each ton of carbon out of the air. Now again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't invest in this. It is all hands on deck time. We have a climate that is in crisis and needs to be solved, but it simply just doesn't qualify for our thresholds. When we look at our broader pipeline, that is all of the opportunities into which we can invest, you'll see here, got about 1,400 that I'm looking at currently. Now that green, which represents about 23% of our pipeline, we've done preliminary analysis and seen that those opportunities qualify CRP, Cater, and CIE. Terrific. That's a huge number to which we can consider investing. The red are those that have one or no of the three elements, CRP, Cater, and CIE. But the white, and the reason I leave it white is because I like that it's white space to play in. Those are our opportunities that have 2 out of the 3 being complete or qualifying, meeting the thresholds. And we can see that perhaps with some growth, perhaps with change in its technology, they'll be able to meet the 3rd. So we keep those as opportunities we may consider in the future. And again, when you look at that across all 6 sectors of the economy, be that energy, agriculture, transportation, food, waste, buildings, it's a pretty significant number of opportunities into which we can invest to decarbonize our economy. and to deliver spectacular financial returns. Let's take a look at another example. This is a company in which I have invested, my fund has invested. It's called Groundwork Bioag. And what these folks have figured out how to do is actually take a fungal spore called mycorrhiza that has been known for 50 years that when you coat your seeds before you plant them, you grow much higher crop yields. And you can use much less fertilizer, less water, less herbicides, less pesticides. By doing this, we're changing the financial equation for farmers. It costs them less to get more productivity, while also enhancing soil quality. So when this was presented to us, of course, it seemed interesting, but where was the carbon in this story? The big carbon. Well, it turns out that these mycorrhizal spores, when you plant them, this interaction, this symbiosis between the plant and the root system captures a tremendous amount of carbon, permanently associating minerals and carbon in the soil. That permanence is what's very exciting. And so this is a nature-based carbon dioxide removal solution. So we ran our numbers, and as you can see here, you look at our CRP, 20 tons for every dollar we invest. That is 10 times our threshold. Not bad. Next, when we looked at the Cater, this is actually decarbonizing the food system at 250% of our Cater. And the cost, well, you can see it right here. $3 less than our threshold. That means it is measurable, it is permanent, and it's highly scalable, because that scalability is linked to its affordability. And all of this makes, I think, a lot of sense, because what are we trying to do? Well, we want to know what is its contribution to a net zero economy, big part of our goal. And if you're an investor, you want to know, is this going to create value for your portfolio, for that group of investments that you're making? And third, can you identify a way to help monetize further, to drive more change and more decarbonization? It's a virtuous cycle. And when you look at a full portfolio, and here's a snapshot of the portfolio that I have right now, we're looking at almost 3 times that level of carbon reduction potential. 1.5 times the speed, and 1.1 times the price. It's a very balanced approach, and we're seeing decarbonization happen in real time through sound investment and through sound data. So, it takes us back to that question again. Can we trust our intuition when we're making decisions about climate technology, and investing? With the data that we now have and having closed that knowledge gap, maybe in fact we can. Thank you very much.